Vandekar here with Realty One Group Advocates in Downingtown. I am here with Shane McIntyre of Comparion Insurance Agency, who are actually based in Exton, about 5 minutes from my office. So I met Shane last week and thought we'd have a quick conversation about some real estate related insurance issues. And so I'm going to throw the first question at you, which I always get asked. If a tree falls and it's your neighbor's tree and it's on your property, what happens?
You might not like that neighbor, but it is covered by your insurance. It's your property that was damaged. They might be liable, which can be settled outside of insurance. You might have a civil case or something like that. But you would be covering your own damages at that point, yes.
Okay. So what happens, you're buying a house and you actually have not got insurance on the house yet because you haven't settled, and there's a fire like 3 days before you're going to go to settle.
So that is why you have the effective date of the policy on settlement date. So you would have that coverage would be taken over by the previous policy because you had not assumed responsibility of the property yet. You have no insurable interest in the property.
Right.
So that's why we had the delineation date, and that can be moved around depending on closing, but
Right.
That's why you want to have that hard cutoff.
And we do actually cover that in the agreement of sale. That's one of the issues that when a seller sells a property, they have to maintain insurance right up to the date of settlement. What other issues do you come across in real estate, Shane?
Most it's people that just don't understand exactly what the policy covers. Like I just now had a question from a policy that I wrote 2 weeks ago. They're asking me if we can get coverage for the garage, this detached garage on the property. They didn't realize that they're already covered for that. So it's just going through, because a lot of times you're going to settlement, people don't want to sit there and go through the entire policy.
Right.
I try to sit down with my clients, but it's a stressful process. They're just like, get me across the finish line, and then we'll deal with it later. But once you can sit down and realize exactly what your policy covers, people feel a lot more relaxed about it and understand, oh, okay, I took the time to buy something that's proper, as opposed to, because you can get anywhere price-wise. It just depends on whether that coverage is going to be sufficient for your property.
Okay. Now, Comparion is a broker, I take it, as opposed to like a State Farm or a State where they're just pushing their own products. You basically go into a variety of different insurance underwriters.
Yes, so we're actually the brokerage arm of Liberty Mutual. Liberty Mutual is our parent company. A little relationship going on there. They make sure that we can pay the bills if stuff doesn't go right, but it's been going great so far. We started breaking off about 2.5 years ago, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, so we don't sell the actual Liberty product anymore. They want to keep all that in-house, but that gives us the opportunity to write with any other carrier out there that wants to do business, really.
Okay, so you carry Chubb and some of the
Yes, we
bigger
do.
names.
That will depend on what agent you're going to. Not every agent has access to every carrier, but if you go to any one of our offices, you should have access to anybody that our agents have access to.
Okay.
Chubb, Progressive. We recently had Home Site, but that's not going too well. I think they're actually going out of business.
Okay.
But we do have National General, which is a offshoot of Allstate. So what you'll see a lot of times is companies will have their in-house product and their brokerage product.
Okay.
It'll be the same deal, it's just under different names because they want to keep the branding separate.
Right.
So our Liberty Mutual product is now Safeco.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of inside baseball there.
Okay. So what I've been hearing from different agents around the country is insurance rates have been going up like crazy.
Yes, they have.
Are they going up equally here in Pennsylvania, or are we more level because we don't have a lot of the disasters that they've had elsewhere, like Florida, hurricanes? And
So that, again, is going to depend on the carrier. So if you have your big nationwide carriers, a lot of times they have to stretch that risk out, or those losses will affect people in other states. They will go state by state and even like county by county. So in Chester County right now, I have a lot of carriers that just don't want to write. They just refuse to give a rate back. But then if you go to a smaller, more regional, more localized carrier, they will often be more flexible with the pricing in order to, continue to grow their book of business. Some of these large carriers go through periods that they just don't want to grow at all because it's just an increased risk for them. The typical policy isn't really profitable for the company until 3 years after it's written.
Okay.
just because of, commission payouts, loss ratios, stuff of that nature.
Right.
So it really just depends on where you're at and who you're trying to write with.
Yeah. Sounds good. What are the major problems when someone's trying to find insurance? I know it's older houses, it's always knob and tube wiring is always an issue.
That's a big red flag.
Underground tanks, oil tanks, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so anything oil tank wise, you want to have it above ground on some sort of masonry or concrete flooring. That's usually acceptable by most carriers. Anything else, you're going to start running into underwriting issues. The biggest thing that's been happening right now is roof age and roof condition.
Okay.
A few of my carriers that have been really great in the past have stepped up their underwriting processes and their restrictions to the point where if it's over 7 years old, your roof, they're not going to give you an offer.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty young for a roof.
Exactly. And I've had a few people so basically, insurance companies reserve the right to go out and inspect the property periodically.
Right.
And they usually won't send a person if you already have a policy. They'll usually do Google Earth or something like that. And I've had companies that come out now and say, hey, we're going to let you live out the rest of the contract that you already signed, but we're not going to offer you to continue your insurance. You have to go elsewhere because they find that the roof's over a certain age, or there's moss growing on it, or there's discoloration. So really, if you're trying to get, a great rate with a great company, you want to make sure that every type of improvement that you have done to your property you have proof of that.
Okay.
So when you put the roof on, when you redid the plumbing, when you redid the heating system, electrical system, like you were saying, any improvements like that, you definitely want to let your agent know. But going back to the original question, I would say that the roof condition is going to be your first major red flag that companies are going to look for.
Okay. No, I hadn't heard that. So, wow.
Oh yeah, you never really think about it.
No, because roofs go 20, 25 years.
Exactly.
So if they're starting to say that's an issue after 7 years, it's like, you mean I got to replace my roof after 7 years?
Some people, I had a client that I wrote with another one of my carriers. I went out to the property. Not every agent typically does that. I don't typically do it, but I was meeting with him for a life insurance conversation, so I wanted to do it in person, obviously.
Right.
I went out to the property, looked great, looked fantastic. We had the inspector come out with a camera on a drone and sit there and inspected every individual shingle on the roof. And he's like, okay, we're going to need you to replace the roof. Like that's a $10,000, $20,000 bill depending on the size of the property.
Right.
And luckily the client was already in the market for it, so he was already shopping around. He knew it was going to have to happen. But they'll let the policy, most carriers will let the policy go in force and take some time to do the inspection, and then they'll tell you, hey, we're going to cancel in a few months, so you might as well start shopping again.
Wow.
But then that ends up ruining, not completely ruined, but that works against you because it shows that you're not a client that's going to stay on the books for more than a year.
Right.
And that gets factored into your insurance credit score, basically.
Really?
Yes.
So that's a good question. Let's talk about credit scores and insurance rating. How does having a good credit rating affect your insurance?
Fantastic. It helps a lot. So that gives the carriers confidence that they're going to receive payment in a timely fashion. You're not going to have any crazy events. Typically, you're not going to run into a lot of claims. But it's not the only factor in there. Obviously, the condition of the property is a huge factor. And then there's also your personal insurance history. So your level of coverage, as well as how long you've had coverage and how long you've stayed with a single company, are all factored into that insurance score.
Okay.
I mean, when we do run insurance scores, it's not going to affect your credit. It's not going to hurt you or work
Right.
against you. But some of those things are factored in. Like if you're bad at making payments, if you're delinquent on accounts, that's going to show up, and then you're going to get a higher rate then.
Okay. Interesting.
Just something recently that has happened. Whenever you do have an event at your property, whenever something does happen, a claim situation, talk to your agent first. Talk to your agent before you call claims, before you talk to anybody else from any other company or any other department of the company, because there is certain language that you do not want to use because you will not be covered.
Okay.
So say there's, a water event that happened. If you use the word leak in any form or fashion, not covered. Immediately, it's not covered.
Oh, interesting.
So what we typically advise is, hey, was it a accidental sudden discharge of water or was it a leak? No, it was the first one. Use that and you have a better chance of that getting covered. So definitely use your agent as the resource that they are. We've been around, like, we do this every day. Most
Right.
people don't know what they're looking at when they're looking at an insurance contract. It might as well be a different language.
Right.
So definitely use your resources and find a good agent that you know will take the time to actually give a one-on-one with you, actually give you a policy review. If you go to, the online resources where you go and just purchase the policy yourself, that's great. I mean, it's fast, it's easy, you usually can get a pretty decent price, but when it hits the fan, it's never good for you.
Right.
It never works out, and their service department is not going to help you the way that the agent that knows your wife and kids are going to help you out.
Right. So if somebody's shopping for insurance, what's the best way to go about it? Yeah, I mean, do you go to several different companies and get quotes, or?
Yeah, so I would recommend going to brokerage and going, if you want, more is always better. So going to multiple brokerages is always an option. I would just also make sure that you check with the brokerage who they offer as a carrier, because it can happen to where carriers can block out additional quotes if you've already been quoted with that or there's a current open quote for the policy.
Okay.
So it's really, you're not accomplishing anything by getting
Right.
like 3 progressive quotes from 3 different people.
Right.
But I would just say, go to somebody that has more tools in the toolbox than going and shopping yourself, because you might not even be doing it the correct way and looking for the right things that you need.
Right.
Most people will underestimate the amount of insurance that they need. Most people think, oh, it's not, I don't understand what these numbers mean, first of all. Second of all, I don't have that much stuff. All the
Right.
things you would think of. I can guarantee you're worth much more than you think you are. So we want to go ahead and cover the back door here.
Right.
Especially liability wise. I've seen so many people undercut liability, and as soon as the lawsuit gets filed, you're paying out of pocket. So.
So do you think most people should carry an umbrella policy for liability?
I recommend every one of my clients gets an umbrella policy.
So
Now,
can you just talk about what an umbrella policy is? Because people go, well, isn't that for rain? But-
yeah, exactly. Well, it's a very nice umbrella you have there. Well, so basically the simplest way to understand liability umbrella policy would be, it's just an additional layer of protection for any type of liability that you are found, liable for. Any type of claim that happens, that will come into effect after the original policy liability coverage is exhausted. So, example, typically under an umbrella policy, you have a homeowner's policy and an auto policy. The trifecta is all 3 there. So if you, say, have a $500,000 in liability protection on your homeowner's policy, some slips and falls, horrible accident, something happens, right? You get sued. Well, up to that $500,000, you're going to be covered through your homeowners. But if everybody knows that if it's a major event, say, especially in the case of an auto accident, what if somebody dies? That's not going to be a $500,000 lawsuit. You're looking in the millions then. You're looking to something substantial.
Right.
Well, that is when the umbrella policy will kick in to cover the additional liability coverage that isn't afforded by the underlying policies.
Okay.
And I've seen this a lot with people that have rental properties. So they'll have, $500,000 over here, $500,000 over here on all their different properties. Well, then I always recommend adding an additional $1 million, $2 million umbrella atop all of them. You can tie them all together underneath the same umbrella policy. You don't need one for each one. So that's going to be more direct liability protection on you yourself. It also covers you for some things that normal protection will not cover you. Libel, slander, all those fun lawsuits that pop up every now and then. And it is effective anywhere in the world. So say you're traveling, something horrible happens, you're still covered even though you're outside the United States. That is not usually the case with other policies.
Okay. And they're not that expensive, really.
Oh, no.
Compared to everything else.
Exactly. Well, that's why, because it only comes into effect if you're already exhausting your underlying coverage. It's typically, a couple $100 for the year, depending on how much you have, like how much exposure you have.
Yeah.
But that's why I try to run everything as a total package, because if I can get the total package you're not going to worry too much about exactly how much X coverage or this coverage is costing you. But if you look at everything together as one bill, you're like, oh yeah, I'm saving money. I feel comfortable, financially taking care of this. Well, then I'm not really worried about, the extra couple $100 for the umbrella because I saved it for you over on the auto.
Right.
Because companies want to have that extra level of protection that will give you discounts for it.
Yeah.
So usually you meet in the middle somewhere.
So usually if you have an umbrella policy, it's with the same company that you've got your auto and house with.
Most companies they will always prefer that. More policies is always good, obviously, but there are companies out there that will just write an umbrella policy for you in case your current company doesn't offer one or doesn't offer one at the limits that you're at. Typically, there's a minimum requirement and liability and bodily injury protection that you need to have in order to have an umbrella with the company.
Okay, good. That's useful. Anything else?
Appreciate you coming in here. It's a great conversation. And nobody ever wants to talk about insurance. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. So
No, it isn't, but it's important.
It is.
And it's something that you need. It's one of those things that it's like health insurance. You don't really want to pay it, but you need it. And you don't really want to pay insurance, but you need it. And you need it when you need it.
Exactly. Nobody's ever asked me during a claim, well, what was my premium? No, it's how much coverage do I have? Am I covered for this? So it's a necessary evil, I like to think of it as.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
And till next time.